So today we're going to be talking about what you expect to happen. An expectation is something that you expect to have happen, that you would want to have happen. So today we're going to learn about expectations and beliefs about your substance use. You're going to learn about alternative behaviors to achieving those same desired outcomes. And expectations are what we want to see or have happen when we engage in a particular behavior. And we're going to talk about what effects a person might expect from using alcohol or other drugs. And then you're going to individually complete a brief questionnaire to identify your own expectations. And then we can kind of discuss some alternative behaviors to achieving those similar outcomes. So people have expectations about certain courses of action, and that these expectations can have a powerful effect on your behavior. Like if I expect for, something good to happen, then I'm probably going to be pretty hopeful and behave pretty happily. But if I expect for something negative to happen, like my partner's going to come home in a bad mood, then I'm going to probably behave pretty negatively. And so maybe people feel comfortable in social situations if they are drinking or using drugs, and they say that the substance use makes them feel more relaxed, so they're better able to communicate with others. And some people believe that drinking is going to make them a better dancer or perform better sexually. And some people have negative expectations about their substance use, like getting arrested or feeling bad the next morning. I know for me, I have a negative expectation with smoking marijuana because every single time I did it, it made me sick. And that's actually called cannabis hyperemesis syndrome. If you're vomiting, it is an actual thing. It's an allergic reaction. And so in the substance use field, when we expect for something to happen when we use drugs or alcohol, we call it an outcome expectation. And so the way that we react or the behaviors that we have is directly associated with what we expect to happen. So like if I go into a store and I ask an employee, where is an item? Where can I find this item? And I'm going to expect the clerk to be courteous and helpful. And if they're not, I'm probably going to get really upset. And I might say I'm never coming in the store again because I expected them to be helpful. And these expectations are going to play a very important role in our decision to use and in how much we're using and how often we're using. So it's helpful for us to identify both the positive and the negative expectations that we have about our substance use. So I want you to think about a time before you ever used. Even before you took that first sip or you smoked for the first time, you did have an expectation of what the drug or the alcohol would do for you. So how do we come up with, where those expectations come from? Like, where did they come from? Maybe it was something that we saw in our family or some friends or on TV or in the community. We see other people reacting to it. Maybe watching dad get really drunk and stumble all over the place and act goofy, or watching dad get really drunk and get angry or abusive. Or maybe your friends were smoking weed and they got funnier and more relaxed, or you see it on television. So this is how we develop an expectation of what it might do to us. And all of us had this expectation before we ever used. So I want you to stop for a second and just think, what did I expect to happen the first time that I used? I mean, obviously now we know what it's going to do to us, but the very first time that you used, you didn't really know how it was going to affect you, but you had some sort of expectation of what it would do. So it's kind of important to understand what that expectation was. Important now to understand, what do we expect to happen now? So the questionnaire that I'm going to give you is based on one that was created by Dr. Sandy Brown and her colleagues in 1980. It's called the Alcohol Expectancy Questionnaire. And she was one of the first to assess alcohol-related expectations. And then Dr. Damari Rosenau developed the Alcohol Effects Questionnaire in 1983, which is just a very brief measure that assesses both the positive and the negative effects that people expect alcohol to have on them. So in this session, we're extending the idea of expectations to include substances other than alcohol. We have to remember that different substances are going to affect the body and the mood in different ways. like cocaine is going to be a stimulant, but alcohol is both a stimulant and a depressant. So the expectation for using alcohol is going to differ from the expectation from heroin. And so, while we've given a little bit of a free license here in extending the concept to the other substances, we have found that it is useful for this particular session, and you might find it quite consciousness raising. So there's 8 expectations listed that are common to a lot of people. You should just kind of write out 1 through 8 on your paper, and you're going to write down true or false next to each number. So determine whether this is true or false for you. Number 1, using alcohol or other drugs makes me feel less shy. Number 2, I'm more likely to do stupid things when drinking or using. Number 3, I'm more romantic when I use alcohol or other drugs. Number 4, alcohol or other drugs makes the future seem brighter to me. Number 5, when I use alcohol or other drugs, it's easier to tell someone off. Number 6, using alcohol or other drugs makes me feel good. Number 7, I'm more likely to say embarrassing things after drinking or using drugs. And number 8, alcohol or other drugs helps me to sleep better. Now, what I want you to think about is how realistic are these things, these expectations. I know that some people say, they want to feel less shy, so they're going to use. It helps me to be more social, right? Have you ever been around somebody who was drunk? That's pretty annoying, right? And probably not having fun having to babysit somebody that's drunk or extremely high. They're probably not rational. They're probably saying things that are annoying, or maybe they're aggressive, and they're just not fun to be around. Whether you yourself are sober or you're drunk, it's still not fun to be around somebody like that. And so what makes you the exception? You're not. So you're probably feeling less shy, but you're probably becoming more annoying or aggressive. Then for the second one, I'm more likely to do stupid things when drinking or using drugs, obviously, because our prefrontal cortex, the front part of our brain, is actually shut down when we're using. And that is our rational decision-making portion of our brain. And if that rational decision-making part of our brain is shut down, then we're obviously not going to make rational decisions. And so we are going to be more likely to do stupid things when we're drinking or using drugs. The third one, I'm more romantic when I use alcohol or other drugs. I've heard people say that they definitely do feel more romantic, or they feel like they're better lovers when they're drinking or using. And I will just ask the question, have you asked your partner how they feel? Because you may believe one thing and your partner's like, not really. So that may be something that you could look into. It's easier to tell, or I'm sorry, it makes the future seem brighter to me. And obviously, people who are using stimulants or like Adderall when they're not supposed to be, it is going to make the future seem brighter. Like, I'm going to be able to stay up all night, I'm going to study, I'm going to get all this work done, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But if you ever seen anybody on meth try to do something, they're doing all the things, but they get nothing done. There is literally nothing getting done. And I've seen people who are, they use, and it makes them a better pool player, or, it makes them better at actually doing music or being creative or things like that. But the problem with that is when they stop using, they're no longer good at music, or they're no longer being creative, because they've learned how to do those things in a state-dependent manner. State-dependent learning is a thing. So if you learn how to do something while you're inebriated, then it's very difficult for you to do that thing when you're sober. So if you decide to stop, then that is going to make it even more difficult for you to do that thing. The fifth one, when I use alcohol or other drugs, it's easier to tell somebody off. Well, I hear a lot of people say, yes, this is absolutely true. But is it? Is it really easier to tell somebody off? It may be easier to say what you're thinking, but it may not be easier to actually say it in a manner that is not going to damage the relationship. And you may actually cause more harm, and you may not get your point across. I don't know if you've ever talked to somebody who was inebriated and they're upset and they're trying to tell you off. They're probably talking in circles and you're looking at them like, what are you even talking about, bro? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me right now. You sound dumb, right? And so it's not actually easier to tell somebody off when you're inebriated. It's just a little bit easier to be aggressive. And then number 6, when using alcohol or other drugs, it makes me feel good. Well, we can't just look at a piece of it. We have to look at the whole thing. Like using ecstasy actually causes depression for up to a week after using the substance. Then we have like hangovers with alcohol, and we have legal ramifications and loss of trust, and maybe like gaslighting and manipulation and hiding things and lying and just the deceit and all the negative things that come along with using substances. And so put yourself in this scenario. You go to the bar, the club, whatever, you have a few drinks, you're having a good time. It makes you feel good, right? But then you got to get in that car and you got to drive home. And you drive home and you get pulled over. And then you're going to get arrested and your car is going to go to impound. And then you're going to have to go to jail, and you're going to have to make that dreaded phone call of, can you bond me out? And now you owe somebody money that you just didn't have in the first place. And then you have to get an attorney and pay more money that you didn't have for an attorney. And then you have to go to court on dummy mission after dummy mission until you finally get, sentenced to whatever it was, DUI. And then you have to pay $1,000 in fines, and you have to do community service. You have to go get a drug and alcohol evaluation, and if the evaluator says you need treatment, then you have to come sit in my groups and do this for weeks on end, or even inpatient treatment, or you have to do DUI school on top of that. And in some places you even have to go donate a car seat to the fire station. Like, it is a lot of negative things that follow along with that. And then you have that on your record. Your driver's license gets suspended. Now you have to deal with having to ask people for rides. And are you having fun yet? Do you feel good? Probably not. So we can't just look at a piece of it. We have to look at the whole thing, the bigger picture. And number 7, I'm more likely to say embarrassing things after drinking or using other drugs. Well, duh. Your prefrontal cortex is shut down, so that's a given. And alcohol or other drugs helps me to sleep better. And it's true that alcohol does help you fall asleep faster, and you're going to sleep more deeply during the first half of the night. But then when the second half of the night comes around, this is your REM sleep, and it's going to disturb your REM sleep. And the REM sleep is the restorative sleep. And so if you're constantly being disturbed in your REM sleep, you're going to wake up feeling less rested than had you just gone to sleep without the use of the alcohol. And it's also going to increase the likelihood of snoring and sleep apnea, which is a narrowing of the air passage. So your brain's not getting as much oxygen, and you can actually go to sleep and just stop breathing. So we have to look at the whole picture here. What are we expecting to happen versus what is reality? What is actually going to happen? Is my expectation realistic? Is the question that we need to ask ourselves. So I want you to think about what your expectations are. Was there anything in the questionnaire that made you think, or did you realize anything new about what you expect to happen? And I want you to think back to the last 2 times that you used substances. And I want you to write down on your paper, did those 2 times fulfill your expectation? Like, what did you expect to happen versus what actually happened? If it didn't fulfill your expectation, how did it fall short? And if it did, what could you have done in that situation instead of using substances to get to that particular outcome that you were expecting. Like if I expected to relax and have fun, how else could I have relaxed and have fun without substances? If I wanted to tell somebody off, how else could I have told someone off if I didn't use substances? If I wanted to be a more romantic partner, how else could I have done that without using substances? So what could have been some alternatives to your substance use in those particular situations? This is going to be your journal session for this particular lesson. Feel free to put your answers down in the comment section below this video. So now that you've identified and verbalized your expectation, this awareness is going to help you in the future when you are faced with decisions about your substance use. And I feel like you guys have done a great job in this session. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, put them in the chat box below this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe.